Here we go. Okay, so we have already finished Canto 1, and this is the class where we begin Canto 2 and proceed halfway towards it. Now, Canto 2, of course, will talk about the journey of Belinda to Hampton Court and the silks. So what we'll do here is, in this particular class, take a look at the way in which Belinda's body and the national body is conflated together, and how Pope is adding an aesthetic dimension to an already political poem. And we'll also look at slightly how science enters into the text. So how Pope brings in this question of optics and light into the Rape of the Lock. In our next class, of course, we shall take a very close look at the silks. So here we go. We've already seen how Belinda has decked herself up. She's put on makeup, and now she's ready in the afternoon to go to the court where the aristocracy would meet, would pass a time in leisure. Please remember that one of the most important distinctions that Pope will make in this poem is between the aristocratic work of a life of leisure, which is part of the critique of the Rape of the Lock, as well as the work of the life of work that the merchant will indulge in. So the merchant does not come into the Rape of the Lock in a big way, but it is very important to note that Pope suggests that there is a distinction between the merchant's life and the aristocratic life, in the sense that the aristocrat is marked by a life of leisure, by a life of playing cards, having coffee and tea, whilst the merchant is engaged in hard work of generating commerce. So in a certain way, Pope's poem is also reflecting very obliquely to the changing class realities of that particular period. Therefore, this is Canto 2, not with glories in the ethereal plain, the sun first rises over the purpled main. It's very interesting also in the way that Pope is invoking the sun almost in every single canto, and this probably relates to the classical O-bar theme, O-bar, that is praising the day or praising the sun, praising the sol as the source of life. And Pope is using this quite deliberately, because repeatedly in the poem, Pope will compare Belinda to the sun in her blaze of beauty and in her power to move the people with her beauty. So Belinda is, as it were, almost the substitute to the sun. So the sun becomes an important metaphor that Pope will use time and again in the Rape of the Lock. Now also notice how Pope will be using the range of colors. We've already had the reference to the purpled mane, and you will of course remember that 1704 was the date of publication of one of the most important scientific treatises of the period, and that was Newton's Optics. Now, with this comes two very important laws of Newton, the laws which are that of the laws of reflection and that of refraction of light. And in this particular poem, Pope will be using the entire panorama of refracted light, the vibgyor, the 7 shades of color within the poem. So in that sense, Pope will be translating Newton's refraction of light into its aesthetic poetic counterpart, as it were. So take a look at the colors, and what the colors will do is provide an iridescent quality of beauty to the Rape of the Lock. So my point being that Pope is using or referring to contemporary scientific economic realities, at the same time using it to breathe in a new dimension of beauty and using it to sublimate in a certain way the Rape of the Lock. Then issuing forth the rival of his beams. Once again, you see how Belinda is always seen as the rival of the sun, almost compatible with the sun in the dazzling beauty that she possesses, launched on the bosom of the silver Thames. So once again, purple, the main, silver Thames. Notice the colors that Pope uses, the shimmering waters of the Thames. Now, Belinda will, of course, be traveling from the outskirts of London, the other side of London where the Catholics lived, to court. Now, interestingly, what I'd also like you to notice here is how this entire journey via a barge, via the barge, which would also serve as a kind of a leisurely journey across the river, which was part of the aristocratic culture of that period, mimics the epic journey of Aeneas across the river Tiber in the Aeneid Book 7. So the journey across Aeneas's journey to war across the Tiber becomes Belinda's journey to Hampton Court across the river Thames. So fair nymphs and well-dressed youths surround her shone. So she's not alone in this journey. She's surrounded by young women and men, all obviously whose destination is to the court to enjoy the life of leisure, gossip, and games that the court had at this point of time. Where nymphs and well-dressed youths around her shone, and you see how focused Pope's entire act of providing beauty to this poem is, but every eye was fixed on her alone. You see, this is the way in which Belinda, despite being part of the feminine world of this mock epic, is provided a degree of amplitude, a degree of sublimation, whereby she attains an epic dimension of beauty in her own right. That's the way in which Belinda is created as a sublime, sublimely beautiful woman. And then comes a very important it's a very beautiful aesthetic image, you see, tinged with a degree of sexuality, but also an image which is deeply political. On her white breast, a sparkling cross she wore. So the cross here, slightly blasphemous in the sense that the cross, which is a symbol of religion, is used in terms of an ornament. So Belinda is wearing the cross as a kind of an ornament on her white breast. So you can already see a degree of sexuality involved there. And once again, the coalescence of the sacred and the profane, which Jews might kiss and infidels adore. So once again, a reference to the colonial world beyond the world of England, which seems to lurk in the Rape of the Lock on the margins, where Pope is concerned with the violence against the world, where Pope is aware that it is the provider of riches, but Pope is carefully distancing himself from it. So on her white breast, a sparkling cross she wore. Once again, notice the Pope's play on Belinda's whiteness, her European beauty, and the way in which this cross is superimposed upon her whiteness. So a reminder of the fact that religion and political power went hand in glove during the colonial process. So religion, Christianity was used as a kind of a prop up, a kind of providing an access also to political power. A lively looks, a sprightly mind disclosed. So it's a mind which is sprightly. Sprightly is mobile. So in that sense, there's an irony here, because Belinda's mind is never fixed on anything or anybody. Now, unfixed is in a certain way a compliment. In a certain way, a compliment also. Now, quick has her eyes and as unfixed as those. And then comes this entire passage on flirtation that Pope is using. That this is very interesting passage that Pope uses in the Rape of the Lock. Pope is referring to Belinda's habit of flirtation, a sprightly mind which is not fixed on anybody, or mind which is forever fidgeting. But how does one flirt? How does one really, transfer one's attention from one target to the other? And look at how Pope defines it. Favors to none, to all she smiles extends. Oft she rejects, but never once offends. So this is the classic art of flirtation. She's smiling at everybody, radiating her desire, radiating, circulating her beauty, but she's offending none, or but rejecting everybody. Right. Oft she rejects, but never once offends, and favors to none, to all she smiles extends. Bright as the sun, her eyes the gazers strike, and like the sun, they shine on all alike. Right? So she's equal in distributing her sexuality, in distributing her smiles to everybody. She will flirt with everybody, but she will commit to nobody. Now, this is also ironical in the poem, in the sense that Pope is here representing the patriarchal anxieties about this flirtatious, coquettish young woman, because once again, her sexual desire or her amorous nature is something which can provoke social quarrel, which can provoke competition, and which is once again a kind of feminine agency or power that is not controlled by the male establishment, as it were. So while Pope is brilliantly depicting Belinda's flirtatious nature, there is equally, I would say, a kind of an anxiety about this unregulated beauty and sexuality that Belinda radiates. You see, she's seen as a potent kind of a threat to patriarchy. But Pope obviously doesn't conceals this anxiety and describes Belinda as almost epic, beautiful terms. Yet graceful ease and sweetness void of pride might hide her faults, if ballets had faults to hide. So Pope is suggesting that young women have really no faults. They cannot be faulted in that sense of the term. And then comes a line which I would call is sublime. Sublime in the sense that it reaches another dimension. When Pope is describing beautiful. You can describe beautiful in many ways. Eyes like the sun, that is an exaggeration. You can talk about the cheeks that glow like roses, that's again exaggeration. But when you raise the bar of beauty to an entire range of imagination, and the language cooperates with you, you have to express that in a clinching language, then you reach a process of sublimation. And therefore, look at the next lines. If to her share some female errors fall, look on her face and you will forget them all. So it's divine beauty, as it were. It's so beautiful that you will forget any faults that she has. But please remember here that Pope is obliquely suggesting the vanity that Belinda possesses, the fault in her in the moral muddle where the Bible and the billet doux are one and the same, and her entire existence is dedicated towards making herself beautiful, circulating desire, flirtation, and unproductive activity, as it were. Therefore, there are errors. But Pope is, as it were, elevating Belinda to another different level. If look on her face and you'll forget them all. This nymph to the destruction of mankind, once again, destruction of mankind, nymph to the destruction of mankind, is a reference once again to the femme fatale, or the fatal woman who can cause exceptional warfare. And the great femme fatale, of course, in classical epics would be would be, of course, Helen of Troy. And in the Indian epics, the classical femme fatale would be Draupadi, the woman who generated an entire conflict of the Mahabharata, as it were. So this nymph to the destruction of mankind. Once again, see how Pope is elevating this to an epic level. Nourished two locks. So, Duto Binuni, right? The two locks which graceful hung behind. Once again. So therefore, there is the suggestion that that Belinda's lock will prove to be an object of great conflict. Once again, see how Pope is using figures of speech like metonymy and synecdoche. Now, metonymy and synecdoche are associated with are ways in which language performs an associative function. So therefore, Pope is replacing the body of Belinda with her hair. So there's an oblique suggestion that these two locks of Belinda's hair represent her body, which is sublimely beautiful, but can be fatal for social quarrels. In equal curls and well conspired to deck, with shining ringlets, her smooth ivory neck. It's a beautiful line, isn't it? Belinda's milk white skin and the black tresses of hair, the bright ringlets, black ringlets. So it's a combination of the black and the white. Exceptionally beautiful hair, exceptionally beautiful young skin. So love in these labyrinths, his slave detains, and mighty hearts are held in slender chains. Please remember that, this concept of the lover being chained within the tresses of hair of the woman was prevalent from the classical age onwards, and later on carried in especially the poetry of Petrarch. So the woman, the concept of being enslaved by the woman through her hair was something that could be found in Petrarchan poetry. And Pope is using this Petrarchan reference for this kind of description. And you will find that therefore Belinda's locks, in every curl, it has the heart of a lover, as it were, encased. So and mighty hearts are held in slender chains. With hairy springes we the birds betray, slight lines of hair surprise the Finney Prey. Now, you see, you had fine nets which were sort of laid for catching birds during this period, right? And you had this entire culture of fishing, which even now some people have, whereby very thin threads are put into water with the bait, so that the fish can bite and get caught. So slight lines of hair represents those threads. We surprise the Finney Prey. Finney Prey is periphrasis, or a roundabout way of referring to the fishes, right? So just as birds are caught with thin traps, and fishes are caught with thin thread, similarly, the thin hairs of Belinda, when combined into that ringlet, trap the hearts of men. This is an almost epic simile that Pope is using. You see, what does the epic simile do? And when you're reading Paradise Lost, you will refer to Milton's grand style, where an epic simile has one common point. So when Satan's shield is, for example, being described, you have a cluster of similes that describe the bulk or the girth of Satan's shield. So Pope is suggesting that these hairs have the quality to chap. Chap what? Chap fishes, chap birds, and chap the hearts of lovers. You see, in the epic simile, you have greatness, you have amplitude and bulk. In the mock heroic, the hair sort of encompasses, or the hair traps men's hearts, then birds, and then fishes. So there's a progressive diminution, as it were. So if the epic simile elevates, the mock heroic epic simile the mock epic simile kind of diminishes. So this is the way in which Pope is using or replacing the heroic with the mock heroic. But please remember that in doing so also, Pope is creating moments of great beauty and aesthetics. It's not just a moment where Pope is dissolving it into laughter. You see, here the laughter is slight, but the admiration for Pope's art is much more significant. And beauty draws us, fair tresses men's imperial race ensnare, and beauty draws us with a single hair, the adventurous baron. So we've now seen the woman, Belinda, and now it's time to see the young rake, the young lover, Lord Peter. Please remember also that Lord Peter was not very tall. He was rather inclined to being short. So the adventurous baron in the sense who wants to conquer Belinda, her hair, and by default her body, the bright locks admired, he saw, he wished, and to the prize aspired. You see, that is an example of a climax. He saw, he wished, and to the prize aspired. The prize here being the lock of hair also, and Belinda's body also, or Belinda's love. Marriage to Belinda, possessing Belinda, is inflamed with desire for Belinda, which is reflected in the hair. Resolved to win, he meditates the way, by force to ravish, or by fraud betray. For when success a lover's toil attends, few ask if fraud, force attains the ends. Now the allusion is to the saying that everything is fair in love and war. And there is also the reference to the Trojan horse in that sense, where the Trojans were defeated by fraud. And Satan also in Paradise Lost refers to work in close design by fraud and guile. So whether it be force or be guile, everything is permissible in the act of love and war. The references once again being to the Iliad, and also the reference being to Milton's poem Paradise Lost. So for this year Phoebus rose, he had implored propitious heaven, and every power adored. Now the reference here is also to the classical invocation to the gods, or the offering to the gods, the sacrifice to the gods, especially in the Aeneid, when Aeneas sacrifices or provides sacrificial offerings to the gods so that the war may be won. Right. So for this Phoebus he had implored propitious heaven, to every power adored, but chiefly love, to love an altar built. So the offerings are not to the temple of Apollo, but the offerings are to the temple of love. So how is this altar created? On the one hand, you have the Delphic mount or the Mount of Apollo where the offerings are made. On the other, you have an altar to love. And how is this mock heroic altar created? It is created of 12 vast romances neatly gilt. So these are the French romances, tales of love, epic tales of love, which were read by the nobility only, and they were kept in their bookcases with gilded bindings. So what you have as Shonar Jole Lekha Badhai Kora Thakto na age. So the letterings and the giltings were in gold, gold-bound volumes, as it were. There lay 3 garters. So what is the altar built of? What is the elevated altar built of? 12 vast romances. There lay 3 garters, half a pair of gloves, and all the trophies of his former loves. The Baron is quite obviously a rake. A rake is somebody who poached upon women, who seduced women in the Restoration Court society. Therefore, these are the trophies, these are the reminiscences, these are the what you can call the ornaments or garments that he has taken from his former lovers. Garters, for example, would refer to the lower half of the dress, and of course the handkerchief. Please remember the handkerchief. When a lady gifted a man her handkerchief, it was a symbol of love. You will remember the havoc that the handkerchief of Desdemona caused in Othello. Right, so there lay 3 garters, half a pair of gloves, and all the trophies of his former loves. With tender billet doux, the love letters that the other women have sent him, he lights the pyre. So once again, the sacrificial pyre. Once again, notice how, the temple of the gods where the sacrifice and the pyre was lit is replaced here by the pyre of love, where you have the altar built of romances and the pyre lit with billet doux or love letters. So with tender billet doux, he lights the pyre and breathes 3 amorous sighs to raise the fire. The numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9 are considered magical, as you know. So 3 amorous sighs. Now this concept of amour is to be noted here. Amour is not just love, it is also desire. So the Baron is inflamed by sexual passion for Belinda, as it were, so breathes 3 amorous sighs to raise the fire. The fire. Once again, see how in patriarchal noble society, a court society, the woman was seen as a kind of a possession or a prize to be won, to be seduced. Right, so the female body as a kind of a trophy. Now, this was also true of the classical age, where where Helen's body, Helen's selfhood does not matter. It is something of a trophy that the 2 rival armies fight for, as it were. Then prostrate falls, so he sort of falls prostrate. He lies down on the ground and begs with ardent eyes, soon to obtain and long possess the prize. Now, you see, it's interesting in the way in which there is a very deliberate undercurrent of sexuality within the poem. Now, although we are referring to Belinda's beauty, there's also the reference to Belinda's body and the act of possessing that body, right? There's this entire sexual suggestion of the rape, which is always subterranean. Pope never allows it to surface to that degree, but there are oblique references. There are what we will call double entendres, where words have double meanings. Pope is breathing them with dual meanings, as it were. And take a look at this line, for example, soon to obtain and long possess the prize. Now, you might think of the Baron as wanting a lock of hair of Belinda. But you might also want to consider this, that the Baron wants to soon possess the body of Belinda and make love to her for a very long time. So long possess the pride. You can see the double entendre here, the double suggestion within within the lines. Therefore, this latent subterranean sexuality is also something which we shall have to consider in the Rape of the Lock. The powers gave ear and granted half his prayer. The rest, the winds dispersed in empty air. So granted half his prayer, because he'll be cutting off only one lock of Belinda's hair. So half of his prayer is answered. And then therefore this, from the Baron now we move to the journey across the silver Thames, the sunbeam, for now secure the painted vessel guides. Now, what is this painted vessel? It might refer to the barge of the nobleman, which is painted gaudily. It might equally refer to Belinda, who has painted herself with makeup. So there is a dual sense here, but now secure, the painted vessel glides, the sunbeams trembling on the floating tides. Once again, this act of reflection of the sunlight and refraction of the sunlight will now become part and parcel of the poem. While melodic music steals upon the sky and softened sounds along the waters die. So this is a barge where women and men are having music, they're floating across, generally having a good time, laughing and socializing. Right, once again, the parallel, as I keep on saying, is to Enos's martial journey across the river Tiber. That martial ethic is replaced here by the social ethic of nobility's leisure. So martial replaced by leisure. Smooth flow the waters, the zephyrs is the winds, the zephyrs gently play. Belinda smiled and the world was gay. Once again, you see that's a moment of sublime beauty once again filtering through. Belinda smiled and the world was gay. Now, what greater tribute that can you pay to a young lady? In fact, I will share a joke here with you, that this was my punchline for many of the love letters that I wrote for my friends. I could just replace, Belinda with, say, X, and you see, X smiled and the world was gay, and it never ever failed to impress. People were absolutely floored with that line. It's a sublime moment when Belinda is elevated, Belinda smiles, and the entire world is transformed into gay. Don't take it word in the sense gay as it is used. Happy is the sense. So you see, what is sublime? For example, take this line: "Let there be light," said God, and there was light. Now, can you just think of words creating or opening up a world suddenly of light? Similarly, that is sublime. That is elevation. Suddenly, you elevate from the ordinary to the extraordinary with the help of language. Similarly, consider this line: Belinda smiled and the world was gay. Right, all the men in this class can try this out with their girlfriends if you want. That is also something which you can do in an SMS. If you really get any credits, do compliment me or rather Pope at some point of time. All but the sylph. So once again, even within this gay atmosphere, somebody has the sense of foreboding. So there's this epic sense of foreboding, of doom coming, of the dream that was given to the Trojans by Hector, the ghost of Hector. All but the sylph, with careful thought suppressed, the impending woe sate heavily on his breast. He summons straight his denizens of the air. So what Pope has done is now he's created an army. Now you see, he's writing a mock epic, but he has to follow some of the martial elements of the epic, some of the elements of warfare of the epic. Now, one of the major wars that you have here is between men and women, right? The battle of the sexes, Lord Peter versus Arabella Fermor. Now, we'll talk about this battle of the sexes later on, but we will also note that through the Sills, Pope is talking about creating an army. What kind of army is this? Instead of the battle-hardy Trojans or the Greeks, the enormous figures of Achilles or Hector, what you have in this particular instance are tiny little Sills who are sort of creating a formation of an army. So this is the art of trivialization and diminution that Pope practices. Right? He summons straight his denizens of the air, the lucid. Lucid, why? Because through their wings, they have wings, and these wings are transparent wings, or let us say, through them there is refraction. So these lucid squadrons, lighted squadrons around the sails repair. So the Sills are gathering on the sails of the boat, trying to think about how they can protect Belinda. Soft over the shrouds aerial whispers breathe that seemed but zephyrs to the train beneath. So when they talk, there's a sort of murmur, but for the men and women below, it all appears to be the murmur of the wind. Some to the sun their insect wings unfold. And this is where I will ask you to see what Pope is doing to the poem. We had talked about Horatian satire. We talked about how satire blends different elements, criticism, laughter, and in Pope's case, in very few cases, in Pope's case, lines of great beauty. And this beauty draws from the theories of Newton, as I said, published in 1704 about refraction. Now, if you have to think about refraction and talk about it in poetic terms, you would probably talk about Keats. And Keats, of course, wrote about seeing a rainbow and his heart leaping up, right? A heart leaps up when I see a rainbow in the sky. And Pope and Shelley also used this to talk about the rainbow in the cloud. And he talks about the water cycle, as it were. But look at how Pope is out of refraction creating poetic brilliance, aesthetic, dazzling array of colors. So, some to the sun their insect wings unfold, waft on the breeze, sink in clouds of gold, transparent forms too fine for mortal sight, their fluid bodies half dissolved in light. I will ask you also to look at the sudden change in the consonants. Pope will be using a lot of S's, sibilant. These consonants are called sibilants, right? The S sound. Now, you will be using the sibilant to convey the zephyrs, for example, zephyrs. And you will be using a lot of the liquid consonants, the L and the N and the N, to talk about light, right? And the light and the different shades of light. Their bodies half dissolved in light. Loose to the wind, their airy garments flew, thin glittering textures of the filmy dew. So it is now that their wings are spread, and with the surface of the wings now comes refracted light. While every beam new transient colors flings. So every beam of light throws out the vibgiors, new transient colors. So it refracts light into different colors, colors that change whenever they wave their wings. So whenever the angle of refraction changes, the colors change, the patterns of refraction change. See, you are talking about a theory of science, but you're talking about it in terms of pure beauty. So theory of light, of refraction, described in terms of pure beauty, aesthetics. This is where Pope is making Newton, as it were, beautiful. In fact, it was Pope who wrote, "Let there be light," said God, and there was Newton. This is part of his essay on man. So Pope is talking about, the splay of the many, the rich tincture of the skies of light. And this is what I think is crucial about The Rape of the Lock. That is not just a satire. There is satire about women, about the nobility, about the battle of the sexes. There are anxieties about women's independence, about the violence of colonialism. But beyond all lies Pope's ability within satire to create a poem of sublime beauty. And that is where he's also bringing in the new discoveries of science. Now, we talk about yoking together violently in the metaphysicals. I'm sure you've done this to a certain extent in the earlier year. But you see, and you talk about a metaphysical conceit where there is this concept, as Eliot suggested, not of a dissociation of sensibility, but as a kind of comprehensive sensibility, as it were. Now, Pope is bringing in, this element of science within the structure of The Rape of the Lock, and this becomes almost, in a certain way, an intellectual exercise in aesthetics, right? So the intellectual, scientific, and the aesthetic come together at this particular moment, right? Therefore, colors that change whenever they wave their wings, amid the circle on the gilded mast, superior by the head was Ariel placed. So Ariel is the great general. So he is at the head of the formation. He is now going to lay down the battle plans. His purple pinions opening to the sun, so the reddish color of diffracted by his wings is azure. He raised his azure. Azure is blue, brilliant blue. So he raised his azure wand. See that beautiful combination of colors. The purpled mane, that is the sky, the evening sky, the afternoon sky, the silver Thames, the purple pinions, the azure wand. What a riot of colors Pope is creating. And he raised his azure wand and thus began. And this is going to be the epic battle speech. What is going to be the battle speech? What and how will he define the role of the sylphs? Why did Pope put the sylphs in place in The Rape of the Lock? What is their function? Do they have any role in the satire? Or is their function merely to add an imaginative, aesthetic dimension to the poem? These are the questions that we shall take up in our next lecture. And we shall take a very close look at what the function of the sylphs are in Pope's Rape of the Lock. But for the present, I will stop at this point of time and take your questions, if any.